This flamed ceremonial mace was presented to the hierarch of an ancient kingdom by his 13 pupils. After the hierarch died, the nation broke down into chaos and strife. The young pupils tried to stay true to their master's teaching and avoid bloodshed, but still they fell one by one in the war, calling out helplessly for peace. Abhorring violence to the end and still refusing to wield the mace, the final remaining pupil was killed in battle. As the bloody mace fell, a great god weeping black tears descended from the heavens. He gathered the 13 souls of the pupils and in exchange cursed the mace with a frightful power. This sword once belonged to the guards of the holy sage. Though made simply and without ornament, the sword's blade never breaks nor bends, no matter how often it is swung in battle. 14 boys and girls protected the holy sage, all of them orphans abandoned by their parents. They lived together with their master as a family. One day, the party was set on by a gang of brigands. The guards fought a desperate battle, rising again from the most grievous wounds to guard the path to the sage's carriage. At last, not one bandit nor guard was left alive. The weeping sage took the sword his guards had held and blessed it, so that he might protect others as his guards had protected him. In a faraway eastern land there was a poet who made a living reciting songs, but he keenly felt the limits of his own skills, and so he made a pact with a ghost. With the power of the ghost inside him, he began to compose glorious and beautiful songs. His fame spread through the city, and before long he was named the official poet to the imperial court. But one day the ghost returned to him, and she said thus, "Your life as a genius poet is over. You shall henceforth never sing a song again." It was as the ghost said. The poet fell silent, and no more songs came from his lips. His dream gone, he plunged the sword into his breast. It still gleams with the glistening of his blood. Far, far to the west of a land of magic, governed in peace by the 500 wise Magi of the council. In both night and day, the streets shone, and the people lived free of fear or hard labor. One day, the 501st Magi was appointed to the council. He was only a child of 10, but so great were his powers and his intelligence that within 2 years and 15 days, he was made leader of the council. A genius of magic, but also a boy of 12, fears assaulted him, and bewildered by a life without meaning, he transformed himself into a crystal that would exist for all eternity. There was once a great sect that boasted 246 shrines and centuries of devotion to the Holy Way. The continuation of the sect's sacred truth was entrusted to the great hierarch, 57th in the line. The hierarch was a grave and frankly honest leader, upstanding as a child of the gods. He was a good and holy man, but at times his honesty made him weak to the pressures of the secular world. One day, the ruler of a kingdom and the protector of the sect asked the holy leader, "Who is the more just, the gods or I?" The hierarch answered that the gods were, and the king became enraged. The king decreed the sect a heresy, and in one stroke, the proud centuries-old religion was snuffed out. The hierarch, seeing his entreaties fall on deaf ears, plunged the trident into his breast. A sword whose name can also mean fire. The rippled blade deepens wounds and makes them fatal. This was a common sword in days past. In ancient times, a warrior and a dragon fought a battle. Seeing his sword melt in the dragon fire, the warrior tore out the dragon's tongue and warped it around his weapon's blade. The enraged dragon blasted a mighty fireball at the warrior. So great was the conflagration that both warrior and dragon were reduced to ash. All that remained was a sword, untouched by the flames. Since then, the sword has held a special magic against the flames of dragons, but it is said that should an unworthy man try to wield it, he will be engulfed in a column of fire. There was once a nest of vampires that lived in an old castle deep in the forest. Each night, the vampires would creep out of their lair and terrorize the helpless farmers of a nearby village. Hearing of the villagers' plight, a renowned vampire slayer came to the village, but he told the villagers that he could not battle an entire nest of vampires alone. Some young men of the village volunteered to help, and together they prepared 4 spears set with powerful crystals. That night, the vampires came shrieking from their lair and attacked the village as one. The battle raged all night long, but when morning broke, all that remained of the vampires was grey ash. Ever since, the villagers have worshipped the spears as guardian spirits. There was once a handsome young man who stole from village to village. seducing the maidens and promising his hand in marriage. Captivated by his charm and beauty, the young women gave him their land, their gold, their livestock, and their hearts. But at one midsummer festival, his victims met and discovered the young man's frauds. The incensed women vowed revenge. With the help of the king of the fairies, they cast a curse on the youth, dooming the suitor's still living soul to be sealed within the sword. Even now, from deep within the cold steel of the blade, you can hear the pitiful screams of the young man as he laments his callous crimes. This sword is forged of a granite that burns red with eternal heat. Only those who enjoy the protection of the moon god, ruler of cool nights, may dare grasp the hilt. Legend tells of a great warrior who carried the sword into battle. Roaring a battle cry, he charged into the fray, where 100 enemy archers struck him through with 1,000 arrows. Yet not a drop of blood flowed from his wounds, and through arrows pierced his heart, his strength failed him not. His army was the victor on that day. With the battle won, the warrior returned to camp, but in the instant he laid down his sword, he froze as cold and as still as ice. The protection of the moon god had finally claimed his life. Once upon a time, in a small village, a young boy and a young girl fell in love. The boy was kind and just, and the girl was cheerful and bright. By the flowing stream, over the hills, and through the fields they played. With a crown of day flowers and a ring of lavender, they promised themselves to each other for all eternity. But one day, the girl's family was forced to leave the village to look for work in the city. Though she cried and begged to stay, the young girl had to leave. The tears of the boy and girl fell to the ground and formed a small pond. This bordage was crafted by the spirit who came to live in that lake, and was given on a whim to a local woodcutter. There was once a man who built beautiful buildings that became treasures of his kingdom. So many treasures did he create, people came to say that his hammer was a tool of the gods. But one day, a war broke out between his country and its neighbor. All the men of his kingdom were called to join the army, and the builder was no exception. The man who hated destruction was no warrior. In the midst of war, the architect was killed, and the beautiful towns and buildings he created were reduced to mere broken rock. Until the moment of his death, the builder did not once take another man's life. Will the next owner of the Hammer of the Gods be a lover of creation or destruction?